Hey guys, I'm back. Sorry, I needed a little bit of water. My throat is a little bit weird today, but I want you guys to do the following. So go ahead and select your grouped object, and you'll notice that these are still strokes. So let's go ahead and go to Object, Expand Appearance, and now these become shapes that are filled with black, as you can see. Now we're going to turn this into a pattern, and the way you do that is you select the object that you want to make a pattern. It can be anything. In this case, it's just a bunch of lines. We go to Object and then Pattern, and then what we'll do is we'll hit the Make button. And what that does is opens up your Swatch library, and then it says a new pattern has been added to the Swatch library. And then we hit OK, and you'll see this pattern dialog here that we'll be using to create our pattern. If you zoom out, you can see 5 by 5 copies. So this is a grid form of the copies. This is what it would look like. And you can see that you can actually modify these so that they make more sense in your grid. So like for instance, I'm currently just regrouping the things in this rectangle to kind of change up the grid. Now you don't need to have a grid. You can do it by hex by columns, hex by rows, and you can kind of see that gives you a different look. If you want to get these to scooch closer together, just click anywhere in the width or height area. If this is linked, you can change one and the other changes. And I'm going to use the arrow key, the down arrow key. You can kind of see that it gets closer and further away because these numbers change. So if you see a number you like, maybe this is too much, maybe this is too little, maybe that just looks perfect, you can actually change that. You can also unlink these and change the height specifically and not the width, and vice versa. So you can kind of get these to look the way you want them. So any object that you draw can be turned into a pattern, and in this case it's just black and white. Once you're happy with this, you can click the Done button, and what that will do is it will save that pattern that you just saw in your Swatch library as a swatch. You can kind of see it, new pattern 2, I didn't name it. Here's how it works. I'm going to just draw a circle, D for default to make the circle black stroke, and I'll make a transparent fill, and I'm just going to hold the Shift key down so you can kind of see how this works. Normally, if you had it selected and hit the K for live paint, you can then click the swatch and paint inside of this if you wanted to. I'm going to undo that. Or, you could take the swatch and directly fill it in if the object is selected. So let me go ahead and select that object. And you can fill that into the object. There we go. Or you can just click, double click here and fill it in. Actually, just by having it selected, double clicking the swatch automatically applies that swatch. Of course, be careful, double clicking the swatch opens up the pattern again, and you can actually change this after the fact. I'm just going to cancel out. Now say your pattern is too big or too small inside of the shape you draw. You can actually fix that just by going to the scale tool, right, and selecting the object, hitting the scale tool twice to open up your scale window, and you'll notice that your object might change because it might change from 100 to like 50%. But we don't want to change the actual object, we want to just change the pattern. And so you can see if you uncheck this transform object, your pattern will change. I'm using the down arrow key so you can kind of see how this works. So this is currently non-uniform, and if I wanted a uniform change, I could do that here. So you can actually go in after the fact and create these patterns and actually use them to fill objects. So for instance, if I take like a couple of circles here that are just default circles, and let's say I just take the one circle and I go to Object, Pattern, Make Pattern, and I'm going to hit OK. You'll see that that actually creates this grid of circles, which you could then try different things, right? This looks kind of interesting. Could be used, something like that could be like fish scales, especially if we were to bring them tighter together like this. Maybe if I were to unlink it and make the height a little different there. And you can kind of see that now I've just made this cool looking set of fish scales that are white on black. That's the reason we're not, if they were transparent, you wouldn't see the other ones. And then we can hit OK, save, done. And now that, it could be something that we use to live paint. Like for instance here, I can select my animal, and instead of normally going through with K with the live paint tool, I could select the swatch library, Windows swatches, and I can actually pick that swatch that I just made and then fill in the seal here, as you can kind of see. And that actually creates something that maybe looks okay, but if you don't like it, you can just try a different thing. And remember, in order to change the scale of the pattern, just double click, select the object, double click the scale tool, S for scale, and then go ahead and change your uniform pattern to what you want, and make sure transform objects is turned off. And that's going to give you that pattern. And then when you're done, just having fun, I would love you to try to make a couple of patterns. Maybe you could use some of those patterns in different ways for your drawing, but I'd love you to experiment or explore the idea of using patterns to save yourself some time when we create textures for the drawing and those kinds of things. So make sure you know how to use a pattern maker tool, and make sure you know how to use create these patterns using shapes that you draw. Even the most simple shape can turn into a very complicated pattern. What I'd like you to do is turn in the screen that has some of your work available, at least the drawing of the animal that you've selected. I want you to go to File, Export for Screens. Select the one that has all the objects on it. In this case, it's artboard number 1. You can kind of see that here. I just need that one, not all of them, so uncheck the ones you don't want to export. And go ahead and save this as a JPEG. You can do JPEG 80. And go ahead and export that artboard someplace where you can find it. I'm just going to put it on my desktop. And that's what you're going to be turning in as you can kind of see. That I would love to see a couple of patterns and the shape of the drawing that you've outlined. Try to do a good job. See if you can create something that's really interesting. And remember, we're working with coloring books. So, this week, so the more interesting detail you could put into these shapes, these animals or whatever you design, the better it will be. So that'll be the next thing we'll be kind of working with, is creating a composition for a comic book page that you can actually create. Okay, I hope you had fun with this exercise, gave you some more experience with the pencil tool, and as well as this new technique of adding a pattern into your objects, or using them in some way in your illustration. And remember, you can use these patterns just like any other color, along with the strokes, and so you've got this ability to create some really nice looking work here. And again, in order for this to work, you've got to get your drawing to be somewhat flattened. And if it's not flattened, it's going to be a little bit of an issue. So make sure that you've got it the way you want. And don't forget, you can always go back if you need to in the swatch area, and you can always double click this pattern, right? And that's going to open the pattern back up. And if you want to change it for whatever reason, so make it like this, you can save that by hitting done, and notice how this changes the pattern after the fact. So these patterns are just like any of the colors. You can go back in and modify them as needed. Notice how I accidentally added that pattern as my outline, which is boo-boo. All right, hope this helps, and hope you have fun with some patterns. Would love at least 2 patterns, and you can show them to me, just by using normal like shapes, like whatever, like just circles or something like that. Okay. Good luck.